This video lecture is about the various forms and motives behind political participation. Political efficacy is an idea where we begin today. Now, political efficacy is all about the sense of being able to accomplish something politically. The more efficacious one feels, the more likely one to participate. So if you ask people sometimes, why don't you participate politically? They will tell you sometimes, well, that's because I don't feel like my vote matters, or I don't feel that regardless of the actions that I take, something will change. So the sense of futility would be the opposite, the sense of efficacy. The more efficacious you feel, the more likely you are to participate, and conversely, the more futility you think your actions will have, the less likely you are to participate. Also, party identification plays a significant role in deciding whether or not to participate. The stronger you feel about your attachment to a political party, the more likely you are to participate. And conversely, the less attachment you feel to any political party, the less likely you are to participate. Social motivations can also cause people to participate. Meeting new people, making friends, developing relationships can motivate some people to become politically involved. There are different types of political participation: nonviolent and violent. Let's talk about nonviolent first. The most straightforward way of political participation is to follow politics. No, don't be surprised. Just following politics is identified by political scientists as a way of participating. Just sitting on the couch and watching television programs, watching about politics, listening to the news, listening to talk radio, political talk radio, all of those things are forms of political participation. And they're not particularly easily achieved. In the 21st century, when people have a lot of distractions, when they have hundreds of cable channels, YouTube channels, all sorts of movies, it's very difficult to actually give time to following politics. Voting, that's the next most straightforward way to participate, is to just vote. But in recent presidential elections, the turnout rate is between 50 and 60%. That's not very high. Most democracies have a greater voter turnout rate. Contacting public officials. This has also become very easy in recent years because of email. Anyone can contact their public official, their congressional representative, and in most cases also their state officials by just Googling their name and then filling out a brief electronic form with their message on the internet, sending the contact, sending the email, and you're done. And yet the majority of people still don't do it. The next one is strikes. Strikes are usually done for the purpose of improving working conditions or salaries. So strikes are political because they demand change in social conditions and economic conditions, so to speak. They're not simply isolated incidents, or usually they're not just isolated incidents that should be considered outside their social context, but on the contrary, they usually are a symptom of some larger social issue, some problem. Protests. People can protest various things. They can protest events. They can protest policies. Marches and rallies are very closely related to protests. People can march in order to advance a cause, like the civil rights. People can rally, for example, in order to either support a cause or support a particular politician or political candidate. Boycotts are economic sanctions that refuse to accept products or services from a given country or a state or an organization for some political reason. For example, in the past, it was very popular to boycott the Olympics, particularly Summer Olympics. Summer Olympics in Moscow in 1980 were boycotted by Western countries because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In retaliation, the Soviet Union and its allies boycotted the Summer Olympics in Los Angeles in 1984. A number of countries boycotted Olympics in South Korea in 1988. So boycotts are frequent. Sometimes entire countries are boycotted. For example, in the 1980s, South Africa was boycotted by much of the world because of its system of apartheid, of official racial segregation. So boycotts are economic sanctions that try to change the course of policy of a country or of an organization by denying that country or organization access to markets. Pickets is when people stand around an office, let's say a politician's office or an office of some major corporation to whose policies they oppose, and try to draw attention to their cause. So, for example, in 2014, 2015, a number of politicians' offices were picketed by immigrant reform activists because they said we need to have a comprehensive immigration reform, and you are opposing it. You are dragging your feet. So this would be an example of pickets. We have to say that not all political participation is nonviolent. That while some people say that violence is un-American, in actuality, violence is quite American. Assassinations have been frequent. Presidents have been assassinated. 4 American presidents have been assassinated. Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy. There have been 6 or 7 very serious presidential assassination attempts that came close, but were failed attempts. Civil rights leaders have been assassinated. Riots are also a form of political participation. They're usually caused by some kind of social or economic imbalances, and they are manifestations, they're political manifestations of the frustration caused by those imbalances. Lynchings can also be viewed as a form of political participation if the message behind them is to communicate the idea that there are superiors and inferiors here, and that the mob that considers itself racially superior is willing to carry out its brutality, what they call justice, in the name of sending a political message. So lynchings are not just isolated acts of brutality, they are in fact political in nature. Terror and intimidation campaigns, and I would also include suicide attacks into the same category. Terrorism is political violence. Terrorists don't do what they do because they're crazy. I mean, some of them might be, I don't know, but that's not the motive. The motive behind terrorist violence is political, and terrorists are trying to change something politically, and they carry out their attacks to bring about attention to their cause or to bring about change in policy from the country that they attack. Pillaging is when you rob and steal. Usually pillaging occurs during a war. So sometimes you pillage in order not just to enrich yourself, but to kind of send a political message to the vanquished enemy. Revolutions and wars are 2 extreme forms of political participation and violence. What's a revolution? A revolution is a rapid change in social, political, and economic order. So a revolution is more than just a change of faces in government. It is a change of actual economic, social, and political policies. Revolutions tend to be violent. They do not have to be, but usually they are. Wars, of course, are always violent by definition. And in fact, some people do not consider wars a form of political participation, but something that transcends political participation, some other separate category. However, we should actually see wars as political participation. They're simply an extension of politics when normal, regular means fail. So pretty much when all other means fail, wars begin. Countries, leaders do not begin wars just randomly, just for the sake of violence. They begin them to advance some kind of political purpose. So wars should be considered political violence. There are different ways in which people can participate. Approximately 22% are inactives. They engage in no political participation at all. Roughly the same percentage are voting specialists. They vote, but they don't do anything else. They might also follow politics a little bit on the news, but that's basically it. They will not do anything other than that. Parochial participants, approximately 4% of the population, are people who care only about the issues of their community. Have the potholes been properly filled? Has the incident of police brutality in this community been properly addressed? Has the city spent enough money to pick up garbage in time? And issues of that nature. Their specific community, their problems only, and there are people like that who actually do not care much about national news, do not care at all about international news. They're all about their own backyard. Communalists are the type of participants who avoid partisan politics and avoid conflicts. They believe that there is not a democratic or a republican way to pave a road, and so they want everyone to cooperate in the name of technical solution to problems. Just to say, if your car develops a mechanical problem, when you take it to a mechanic, I don't think that you're going to begin by interrogating your mechanic about his politics. Are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? What do you think about healthcare reform? All you care is about that mechanic's technical qualifications. So communalists believe all you have to care about is the technical ability of people, of politicians, of public administrators who are elected or appointed to solve these problems, and their partisan orientation, their ideological views are irrelevant because it's all about technical solutions to specific problems. Campaigners, about 15%, are the opposite. They are extremely ideological, and they see their side as being always right and the other side as being always wrong, and they say, well, the other side is destroying the country, etc., etc. People like this often become precinct captains, and they organize people to go out and vote for their particular side. Complete activists, about 11%, are all the people who participate in all sorts of activities and in both modes of participation as campaigners, that is to say, sometimes they're extremely ideological, and also as communalists, that is to say, sometimes they're extremely technical and inclusive and non-ideological. Demographics and voting is a very important topic because young people do not vote very much. One of the interesting things to note is that the median age of the voters in the United States is approximately 45, meaning half of all the voters are older than 45 and half of all the voters are younger. At the same time, the median age of the United States population is only 37, so the voters are older than the average population. Seniors vote at greater rates than any other age group, but it's important to note that seniors are not the majority of votes, and the reason why not is because there's not enough of them to make up a majority, even though they participate at greater rates. The youngest age group, 18 to 24 or 18 to 29, generally votes at the lowest rate of all age groups. Whites generally vote at greater rates than African Americans. But this was not true in 2008 and 2012 because Barack Obama was on the ballot, and I think that changed the numbers a little bit, because in 2008 whites and blacks voted at approximately the same rate, and in 2012 blacks were actually slightly more as a percentage of the electorate than whites, given their respective proportions in the population. So that was in 2012. But other than that, other than those two elections of 2008 and 2012, whites actually voted slightly larger turnout rates than African Americans. However, African Americans vote at significantly greater rates than Hispanics or Latinos, because I think black churches have done a very good job in terms of mobilizing people to vote, getting the souls to the polls. But there hasn't been quite the comparable organization in the Latino community. And that's the basics of political participation.